Welcome to episode 3 of Blue Collar Startup. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. We're sitting here with Devon Camenga from Camenga Construction. Where are you located out of?
I'm located in Troy.
Troy, New York. For those of you listening outside of the capital region, if we have listeners outside of the capital region, we hope to have listeners. That's my big joke right now.
Sure, you're bound to have one or two,
right?
One
or two. You know, right now it's my mom, Derek's mom, probably our significant others.
You know what? My whole family lives outside of the capital district, so
perfect.
I mean, you've probably got a good 1,500. I'm related to everybody in Chenango County.
Chenango County.
Chenango County, yeah. Madison County, Otsego County, Herkimer County, they all come to a point somewhere out there.
So I have family in Greene, New York.
Yeah.
My fiance is from Bainbridge. That's all Chenango.
Yeah, it's out by me. Yeah, Greene is a town or two over, right? You have to go through Norwich and then Oxford and then Greene.
Yeah.
Lot of green out there.
A lot of green out there. Yes, there is. I actually love it down there. I've been thinking about. We've been talking about trying to find a little house down there so we can have a place to scoot out to be closer to family. Because her whole family's down there. A bunch of my family's down there. And I really do just love that area, man. It's really cool.
It's kind of like I call it the Central New York Triangle, right? You got Syracuse, and you've got Utica, and you've got Binghamton.
Yeah.
And you're in like that no man's land of nothing out there.
Yeah.
You know? Except for Sherburne, home of the pageant of bands, right? Or you got Colgate College, which is just a little rinky-dink town.
Yep. That's great. That's fine. That's when we were talking earlier, and you're saying Sherburne. I'm like, wait a minute, I know where that is. You ever get over to the Outpost?
The Outpost? No.
That's in Oxford, I believe, which is another one of those.
The only time I went to Oxford was when we played against them in football or basketball. That was it.
All right, that's fair. Great little area, though. We loved out there. So anyway, now that we've got that going on, so tell us a little bit about Camenga Construction, about what you do, what kind of construction that you're doing, and kind of how you got started.
Sure. My business, we do just about everything. A lot of remodels. Lately, it's been endless bathroom remodels. I think last year I did 9 on top of decks, kitchens, so on and so forth. So the nice thing that's a little bit unique about what I do is I don't tend to use subcontractors. Mm-hmm. So when we do a remodel, I'm doing all the plumbing, all the electrical, and I have third-party inspections and stuff like that. So there really isn't too much that I don't do. I mean, I started doing windows and door replacements. I even built birdhouses, I remember, for a while. I don't do a lot of roofs anymore. I don't need to get up on there.
Yeah.
But if I'm doing an addition or I'm building a house, then obviously I do the roof. But I taught myself plaster work. I've done some masonry stuff. So there's really all aspects of construction, whether it's framing to finish work.
Yeah. So is that your slogan? From framing to finish work, Camenga Construction.
No.
So
I'm not important enough to have a slogan
yet. All right, that's fair. All right.
My kids try to come up with a bunch of cheese ball ones.
Yeah.
But,
write your jingle.
Yeah.
So get it on the radio. What it's interesting because when we were just talking about this, or when you were just saying, I should say, is that it made me think about the fact of, you said you did 9 bathrooms, assorted other projects, decks, et cetera, et cetera. Would you say what's life like right now as a contractor compared to what it was like, say, 5 years ago? So, and I asked that question looking for an answer, or looking for you to tell me about if you're seeing an increase in demand, because I feel like 5, 6, 7 years ago, contractors were left, right, and center. They were everywhere. Like you couldn't walk down the street without stumbling across a couple contractors. Now, I feel like I can't. I've got a buddy that's a contractor. If I could get him here next year, I'd be lucky.
Right.
Have you been seeing that? Is that something that you see with your business? Tell me a little bit about the difference between now and years ago, let's say.
Yeah, I think I think there's a lot of flyby contractors, or maybe guys that do it part-time or girls that do it part-time.
Mm-hmm.
But there's seems to be kind of a void, or a limited supply of guys like myself. Where, I'm kind of smaller, right? I'm not a huge, construction business, but I'm not a super small guy too that just does it on the weekends or
Right.
when. So I think it's in the midst of COVID and trying to get materials. It's a challenging time right now, but having a limited supply of qualified or skilled contractors, I think is certainly an issue. And my phone won't stop blowing up in the last 2 weeks, right? Everyone's gearing up. Oh, the weather starts to change. People want to start calling contractors to do projects. But unfortunately, I'm already booked up.
Right.
So I started booking jobs for next year already.
Yeah.
And it blows my mind that people are willing to wait that long, but it seems to be a continuous conversation about I can't get a hold of anybody, or nobody calls me back, or I just can't find someone to do it. So
I know that's what we've been saying.
Right,
Yeah.
and when they find someone, especially all my advertisement stuff is done through word of mouth, and so when they have someone who says this Camenga Construction is worth the wait, then whatever date I give them or say, geez, I'm really sorry, I'm not available till several months, and they're like, okay, put us in the book, pencil us in, and then we'll come look at the project. So I think with a limited supply of skilled workers, and there is a huge demand for people upgrading, and that kind of goes hand in hand with the market too, right?
Mm-hmm.
The housing market is still booming out here.
Crazy,
We're going on 2.5 years now. It's been super high. So you have people preparing to sell their home, so they need to either upgrade or fix little things, or you have people who have purchased a home and they need a complete remodel, or to freshen up. So there's tons of work out there.
Yeah, it's I know that before we were talking, we've got the small farm out in Greenfield, and there's always projects that need to get done, and some stuff I can do, but other stuff, if I'm good at anything, it's knowing when I don't have the skills to do something and I need to call in somebody else.
That's a valuable skill.
I know,
right
I
there.
think so too. I can't say how many advertisements I've seen over the years where it says, something along the lines like, we'll fix what your husband tried to fix, or, So I always try to know my limitations, so there's a lot of things, especially when it comes to roofing and masonry and things like that. I can do some carpentry stuff, and if I'm working on a barn, it's not a big deal if it's not perfect. It's the barn. It's a lot different than trying to do finished work inside the house. But we've got all these projects and all these things we want to do around the farm, and just trying to find somebody to do those things is like I have a friend of mine who is an amazing contractor, and like I said, we couldn't get him in 2022. It's just not going to happen. He's
right.
I am literally booked out until 2023. And it's March.
Yeah. Good for him, right?
It's just an amazing thing to me about the supply shortage of skilled tradesmen and women and or skilled labor, whatever words we want to use, right? And being able to find it, man, it just blows my mind. So I was just wondering how you've seen that. But again, same guy, my good friend who's a contractor, 5-6 years ago, I could have got him any day of the week.
Sure. Right.
It was just like
we're just driving around, We're sitting at the booth at Stewart's waiting for somebody to say, "Oh, I gotta paint my room," and hey, here's my card. I could be there at 5:00.
Yeah, it's just a really interesting phenomenon to see the difference in just maybe that 5 or 6 years has brought in the blue collar industries, because I don't think it's relegated to just contracting.
No, it's not.
I really think it's all across the board with skilled labor, is that there's just such a shortage of people that can do a good job. I do notice that we've been able to find people like right now, if I talk to someone who is in some sort of blue collar field and I'm like, do you think you could come up? Oh yeah, I got plenty of time. I'm like, all right, these guys, either they're brand new or they just are not very good. No one wants to hire them. That's why they're open.
Even right. It's not limited just to contractors, right? We were talking about this earlier, right? Diesel mechanics.
Yeah.
I know there's a shortage for electricians, not so much for union electricians, but for people who want to do residential stuff.
Yeah.
And there's a huge demand for that. But it can't be just any Joe Schmo. I'll figure it out as we go.
Right. Right.
So that you can't do that either. I think plumbing is the same way. Although the new equipment and tools they've come out with and products, it's so easy to be a plumber now.
Well, you don't have to sweat pipes anymore, right? Like,
yeah, you don't have to. Certain things you should. That's
right,
the difference. Right. Knowing what you should sweat and what you should not sweat.
Yeah.
I guess a positive little glimpse, right? I just had to replace the boiler in my house.
Oh, yeah.
And all the technicians that came in to install new boilers, they were all young kids. I mean, I'm not a young guy anymore. So I call everybody a kid. But
yeah.
I mean, these are people just coming out of college. They're 25, 26 years old, and they have the title of a technician, and they're there. So I'd like to think that maybe we're starting to see some transition to people moving towards that, whether it's because all these other fields are flooded or what, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I do see glimpses of that, but I mean, you don't see too many 16, 17, 18-year-olds on top stripping shingles on roofs and putting up siding and stuff anymore.
No, not like when I was a kid. I felt like that's what you did. And now,
well, you didn't have a choice.
Right. Kids have choices nowadays. I gotta get over that. Like we were talking about before, like we have all these opportunities to do stuff around the house, and it's around the property, I should say, and getting the kids involved is like most they didn't want to play video games, and every once in a while I get my son out in the barn with me doing a project, but he's just like, if they're given the choice,
sure,
they're not out there.
Sure.
When I was a kid, I wanted to be out doing the projects with my dad and my uncles, and they weren't letting me until I got older. I remember being like 8, 9 years old and be like, yeah, I'll come help, and they're like, no, you're not old enough yet.
Oh, I mean, we didn't have that luxury.
Yeah.
So my father, the first time I really was kind of put on my own for doing any type of construction thing, I was 9 years old.
No kidding.
My father bought me a satchel. Or my wife says you have to call it a tool belt. It's not a satchel. But he bought me a tool belt with a hammer, a tape, and a square. Right?
That's awesome.
And we were doing the roof on the garage. And so it was me and my older brother, and my grandfather was on the other side. He snapped the line for me. He goes, okay, I want you to start putting shingles up on here. And I'm like looking around for somebody to tell me what to do. And he's like, you're going to follow this line? And he goes, I'll be back in like 30 minutes and see how you're doing. And so I was 9. Put me on a roof in our garage, starting to lay shingles down.
That's pretty sweet, man.
Yeah, and I have the same tool belt. I still wear the same tool belt. I got the same hammer, everything.
Well, what brand is the tool belt? Because something that's going to hold up that many years, that's quality.
I remember, he was so proud. My father was so proud of getting this because it's all leather and all this stuff. But it's the same tool belt it's the only one I've ever had. And I remember that vividly. And of course, the last thing in my true father fashion, he'd be like, "Don't, F it up."
Right. As any good father should say.
Yeah.
So, I know we're kind of jumping around in order of how I meant to bring these through this, but a lot of good stuff. Tell me a little bit more about your business. So is it, and I know you kind of touched about it, is it just you? You got a couple guys that work for you? Is it...
So the majority of the time it's just me. However, when I have larger projects, I'll hire part-timers to come in, whether it's tipping walls, putting up rafters, or if I got concrete work, I'll typically hire out for that. Lately, I'm not an old man, but there's certain things I just can't do by myself anymore. I think the long-term goal for me is I would really like to find an apprentice and someone who's youthful-minded in knowing what they don't know, and willing to learn to kind of eventually, whether they run their own sites, they go off on their own business. It doesn't matter to me, but there are certain things that I can't do by myself.
Sure.
And I'm more than happy or willing to train somebody when that time comes. So I'm hoping that probably it's going to be by next year. I'm going to have to do something, and my client list is pretty big now, and the jobs stack up. So
sure.
And I'm not interested in, hire my buddy who is a mechanic. He owns a garage in downtown Troy. He's like, you gotta get some employees. You start doing that, and you're just running around. I'm not too interested in that right now, just because I don't want to hustle.
Sure.
I don't want to hustle for work to keep people employed. I really like what I do. I take pride in what I do, and there's a lot less pressure now than in my previous profession. So I like where I'm at, but I also, the long-term goal is probably to expand a little bit, just so I can continue to do the projects that I do.
Absolutely. And that's a nice little segue into, tell us a story about how you even got into this. So I know, because we talked about it, you were an educator, administrator, and then made the switch from that into the construction stuff. So give us, tell us a story about where you were and what you're doing, and kind of what was the catalyst for change, and why you came into construction as your career and left what you were doing previously.
So I was an education major in college, and when I graduated, I went right into the workforce as an educator. Started off teaching third grade, so
nice.
Which I loved. Elementary education was my passion, and then I ventured into fifth grade, sixth grade education. So I was an educator for 13 years, and that morphed into administration. I always worked at the same school. Absolutely loved the parents and the people that are there. So it kind of, it was close to home for me, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I morphed into the administration role, and I did construction work on the side when I was a teacher, only to help subsidize my income. It was private school education, so their salaries are not on the same scale as public sector. And I got lucky with kind of a big contract, a big project, and so that was one of the reasons why I kind of transitioned into doing construction full time. I've been doing construction for 13 years, so this was a good way to jump into that. I always thought, I would go into being a contractor full time many years ago. Now, whether I didn't have the mindset, the heart for it, or whatever, or it really boiled down to it just being too scared to go out on my own. And but this was a nice jump or a boost in leaving education, going into my own business, knowing that I would be okay for a little while, just because I had this guaranteed contractor project for a while. Yeah.
I mean, it's a scary thing. I think over the years I've talked to a lot of people looking to make that transition, or are like, hey, I'm doing this. Sometimes they lost their job, and so they're like, screw it, I'm gonna do this thing, and it's a scary leap.
It sure is, because you don't know. I mean, now you're in charge of your own pension, right? You just don't know where the money's going to come from. What happens if you don't have a job the next month? Things like that. So there's a lot of things that kind of tug at you, that make you question or second guess. Do I really want to, be my own business owner? Do I want to go work for myself? So there's lots of things to think about. And to be honest with you, if it was truly that easy, everybody would do it.
Everybody do it, yeah. And so let me ask you, when you had the comfort of that big job that you're doing, right, to help you make that transition and to take some of that strain off of you. When that job started to come to an end, did you start to feel some of that angst, or at that point had you just really started to line things up?
No, because the reason why is some of the clients that I'd worked for prior to that, I let them know that I was now doing construction full time, so my work was no longer seasonal, right? So they didn't have to book me over breaks or over vacation time or in the summer. And that kind of, evolved into, oh, okay, yeah. So now that I know that, I'm looking to have, some painting done, or I want to redo my entranceway, or, I need some trim work or finish work. So I was actually lucky enough to line up a couple of clients right after that job concluded. And I think it was December, January, or something like that. And then I was able to roll right into a couple more projects that led up to a few months after that. And then I felt pretty confident that once I got started, just by word of mouth, I would be okay. But again, that not knowing was challenging.
Yeah, I mean, it's always there, right?
Yeah, and I think I learned at a young age how to communicate with people too. Plus, having an education background, in administration, you run meetings, and your reputation is everything when you're a business owner or if you're self-employed. Because if you're not good with communication or with people in general, that kind of shows. So even if you're a great skilled worker, if you're not very good or effective at communication, you run the risk of not being successful.
And so just to kind of to summarize it for anybody listening, what I hear you saying is you, as a side hustle, right? We're doing contracting on the side. We're able to, by doing good work, great work, having a great reputation, built up a book of business over time that once the big job allowed you to make the changeover, you kind of had a book of business already built that you could kind of go back to while you were still building a new book. Because I know that, again, that transition, a lot of people are looking at I want to own my own business, I want to own my own contractor outfit. How do I make that transition? And it sounds like side hustle, do a good job so people want to work with you more, and then let them know what you're doing when you do make the jump.
Sure, yeah, and you have to know how to network too. I mean, I had the luxury of knowing a lot of people, whether it was through clients or through schools. But if you're an effective communicator, but you also enjoy being around people, that's a good segue or a way to get into or expand your clientele. So in my line of work, your reputation is everything. So if you not only do really good work, but you have a cup of coffee in the morning when they ask you, hey, do you want a cup of coffee? Yes, I do. Right?
Yeah.
Well, put out some strudel too, right?
Yeah,
And or you take the time to, you talk about how their day was and stuff like that. So, I mean, not to be a therapist, you don't do it because you have to. You do it because you want to, But I can also work and talk at the same time.
That's probably a good skill to acquire too. I know I have trouble. I sometimes just start doing a lot of talking. What do you think the biggest challenge that you've seen so far since you made the jump? What's the biggest challenge you've come across?
I think is coordinating time, right? So when I first transitioned and started, I was taking these jobs, and then I would work that job during the day, and then I would take a night job, and then I would work on the weekends. And I was doing that solely to build clientele, and I also didn't want to be like somebody would call and I'm saying, no, I'm not available, right? I never wanted to lose a new potential customer or client. So what was challenging for me is, being a father of 3, right, and a husband, and having my own hobbies, was finding that happy medium between yes, I have to work to provide for my family, but I also need to be with my family.
Yeah.
So, and then you're running the risk of taking on too much work and you can't finish anything. That's also no good either for you or the clients.
That's the plight of the Adirondack Contractor that I used to hear stories of. I don't know if you ever heard the term Adirondack Contractor. So I grew up in and around like Saranac Lake, Plattsburgh, New York, like North Country Adirondacks. My family has a camp up in the Adirondacks, and I always hear my mom and my grandmother would always be talking about the Adirondack carpenter, and that's the guy that took on too much work.
Right.
So, so would just bounce around job to
Yeah.
job to job to job because kept saying yes to too many things, and then it was just so overwhelmed that just like still wanted to do right by the client, but like wasn't going to a job, working it till it's done, and then leaving.
Right.
But was going, Monday bopped in to do a little wrench twisting, and then Tuesday was on another job site pounding some nails, and then Wednesday was on another job, and that was always there's always a big joke about the Adirondack contract.
Yeah, so my wife has a good slogan. The only thing you should not have finished is the things that we start in our own house.
Okay.
Which catches up to you too,
Yeah.
So, but I think now we see people that are unfinished or that have unfinished work. It's because they're more or less following the money.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they'll be working on a project and something comes along and somebody says, I have to have this done in 2 weeks and I'll pay you X amount of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times you'll see contractors pack up and be like, I'll be back. And then they either don't come back or they'll be back whenever they feel like it.
Yeah, I'm sure that doesn't. I know if that happened to me, I wouldn't be calling you again.
Yeah,
so it's from a reputation standpoint. Back to your point, that's
a year and a half ago. I got 7 new clients, and they were still have them as clients. They're phenomenal clients. I do a bunch of work in their houses, but. And the only reason why that kind of fell in my lap is because they all have had bad experiences with former contractors, whether they didn't finish the job or they didn't do it correctly, or quite frankly, let's be honest, in my line of work, you have some contractors that whether they have problems with the law, they have substance abuse, things like that. So, they've dealt with all those things. So, I just kind of took advantage of an opportunity, and they all had their own circle network of friends. So, and it just kind of branched out from there.
Yeah. I know every time we have anything done and someone's like, who'd you use? Everybody wants to, who you gotta
Right.
Good contractors, hard to find.
Yeah, well, now I go, so they don't give out my name because they want stuff done.
Yeah. All right, well, we're gonna take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
All right.
This episode of Blue Collar Startup is brought to you by Camenga Construction, Spa City Digital Marketing, and DCS Franchises. And now back to our episode. So we're back from that brief sponsored commercial break. I don't know.
Yeah, I got a quick snooze in, right?
So, and you were just saying, so let's talk about it again. So I think one of the important things, everybody needs to find or to acquire or to fall into having some sort of mentor, right? Mm-hmm. I know Derek feels the same way, and you were just kind of giving us this. So mentors that kind of helped you along the way. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, I come from a long line family of contractors, right? My grandfather was a contractor, built log cabins. My father was kind of a side contractor, but he grew up with it and he did it on the side, and then started his own business on the side of contracting. My uncle, LC Construction out in Edmonston, New York. So these are all valuable people that I can reach out to when I have a question or a situation that I haven't seen before. It's truly invaluable to have, whether it's a mentor or somebody to go to when you have a question, right? So although today you can use YouTube and look up anything, but
sure,
it's not always how do you do this product. It's what's the best way to spend your disposable income for new tools. What's what are some smart accounting principles, things like that. So, and my uncle did all that stuff on the side. My father did too. So, when you own a business, it's not just about how much money you can make and how many employees you can have and how fast you can grow. You got to be smart about your finances.
Yeah, running a business, finances are a big part of it. I know it's always been my weak point in business has always been the finance side. I'm pretty good on operations. I'm great at sales and marketing. Finance is always so my first move in any venture has always been hire a bookkeeper. get someone on board that can help me keep my my I's dotted, my T's crossed, and my bills paid. Because otherwise, I'm just like, throw it on the pile, and play to your strengths.
Right. Well, and that goes back to what we said earlier. If you know that that's not one of your strengths, then you need to have somebody take that over.
Yeah, absolutely. So what, and I think I kind of know the answer to this, but what would you say the secret to your success has been?
I don't know. I don't think there's anything special about me or what I do. I think one of my strengths is being a motivated worker. I look forward to going to work every day, but also effectively communicating with people and clients, right? When you get an email or somebody calls you about a job, you need to make the effort to return the call or reach out to them. So I don't know, I guess what makes me successful is being an effective communicator, and being a people person and want to do a good job for the individuals before I move on to the next one.
Nice. So let's talk a little specifically about blue collar, right? So, Derek and I keep talking about the fact that we can't figure out if it's just because we launched this podcast or because it's all happening at the same time, but I can't scroll Facebook, pick up a newspaper. I can't go anywhere or do anything without...
What's a newspaper?
I know. Shh. Chad Prince newspapers. But I really, like, everywhere I turn, I just keep seeing blue collar, whether it's, an article about the number of blue collar jobs that are out there, or talking about the fact that the blue collar industries are so in demand right now, or people talking about the fact, like, hey, if we do not increase our blue collar workforce in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to be in for a major problem with the country's infrastructure and our roads and our houses and our buildings and our bridges, and everything's going to be falling apart. No one knows how to repair these things or maintain them. So I was just wondering what your thoughts were on the blue collar industries on a whole and what you see.
Yeah, I think in a lot of what I hear today is, well, kids don't want to work anymore. People don't want to work. I don't think that's necessarily true. However, I just don't think that they're qualified or they have the skills to do it. I mean, when I look at my kids that are teenagers, if they don't know how to do something, they're not going to do it. It's not because they're necessarily lazy, but since the institution of No Child Left Behind in the 80s, that's all we've done is push in the direction of everybody needs to go to college. So that's the direction everybody's taken in the last 30 years. But now you've got everybody going to college and nobody necessarily going into college for, skilled labor force, right? A mechanical engineer is the gauntlet of anything. But that can mean so many different things. You don't have anyone specifically looking to be certified as a plumber or an electrician. Or wood crafting. So when you don't have that, you have 25, 30 years of nobody really entering that field, or a very small percentage of people entering that field. This is the result where we are right now, is you don't have anyone who with the skills to continue on. That's why your mechanic is 60 some years old, right? And you can't find anybody else to go to, or you're going to a dealership and you got a 23-year-old technician on his phone. So this is where we're at.
Yeah, it's a tough state of things. I just everywhere I look, or like we were talking about before, if I'm trying to find someone to help me with something at the farm or anywhere else really, but it's hard to find people.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in school, you had programs, whether it was through BOCES program or secondary education, and all these other programs that were an alternative to school, right? So you already had this now I guess we see it as a misconception that this individual isn't ready to continue on for school or isn't going in that path, so we'll give them this alternative. It wasn't, in my opinion, it wasn't seen as something that was valued. A trade wasn't looked at as equally as someone who would be certified as an educator or a doctor or anything like that, you know. So I think there's still a little hint of that, but now everyone's starting to see labor rates increase, and that has to do with demand, it has to do with materials, it has to do with everything. So
well, yeah, I mean, look at what a crane operator makes, and
sure,
you know what I mean. Like those guys are making hundreds of thousands of dollars, some of them, and you know, or look at the welders and plumbers and contractors, it's interesting you say that too, because Derek and I talked about it a little bit. I have a client who is he's a blue collar guy, but he does not like the term blue collar. I mentioned it to him, and he was like, "Don't use that term." He's like, "It's the middle labor market. That's what you call it. Don't call it blue." Because he grew up where blue collar and the term blue collar was not used. Just like you were talking about with it wasn't looked at favorably to go to BOCES and to be doing the woodworking or whatever it was that you're doing at BOCES. It wasn't like getting a Regents diploma. Right.
Yeah.
And unfairly, I think, there's, again, like we talked about earlier, I think there's a lot of ways to get an education. College is one of them. Trade school is another one of them.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
An apprenticeship, that's another way to get an education, but to him, it was just, he grew up in a time when being blue collar was frowned upon, and the term was like a derogatory term. So it's just interesting that you say that. Yeah. And the BOCES programs, which are, I think, invaluable. Everybody learns differently, and I always felt that when I was growing up and kids that were going to BOCES, the kids that were going to BOCES, because they didn't learn well sitting in a classroom reading from a textbook and looking at a chalkboard. They wanted to learn with their hands, and they wanted to learn visually and doing things. And I think it's important. I got one of my kids now goes to BOCES. Thank God.
Right.
Because she's just not a person that learns very well from a textbook or in the classroom scenario.
Mm-hmm. Well, I almost wonder, when I was a kid growing up in the 80s and the 90s, I think the idea of blue collar, white collar, the biggest separation was money, right?
Sure.
So going to college equaled success and financial freedom.
Yeah.
Which we now know is not really true.
Well, and maybe it was at one point in time for a short amount of time, but now we know that if you go to college, you're spending tens of thousands, if not over $100,000 on your education, and you may not get a job when you get out.
Right.
You may be waiting tables,
Sure.
And whereas if you go into a trade school right now and you spend 6 months, maybe 2 years at a trade school, and you're coming out, some of these guys are making $80-$90 an hour, $100,000 a year.
Right.
I feel like it's really, a lot's changed.
Oh yeah, the scales have tipped a little bit, and again, some of that is driven by there's just not as many skilled laborers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you have to pay more to find someone who's qualified or skilled. You have a lot of big companies. They're not always necessarily interested in training somebody or giving them time to grow. They need someone who's qualified
and
do
do the
job now. But that's kind of how we are as a society right now, right? We want everything right now.
Right, instant
so everything's gotta
gratification.
get done. Yeah.
Don't make me wait for it. Don't make me earn it.
Yeah, and that's not even the workforce, right? We see that in sports all the time. If you're not winning, you're cut.
So let's you kind of switch gears a little bit. Looking back at, and you said you've been doing what you've been doing 13 years.
13 years, yeah.
Looking back at the last 13 years, anything you do differently? I mean, there's always that.
Start earlier?
Yeah. Make the jump earlier,
Yeah, I think so. I think so. Although, I don't know if I would have acquired all the skill set that I have as far as comfort with people, communications, without all of that through education, administration, and meeting all the people that I've met.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'd be where I am if I didn't go through that. And you have these lulls in the time period where everybody is looking for a job 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I may not have had the success then as I'm having now. So I don't know, but I would say I would have liked to have started earlier.
Okay, that's fair. It's like I said, it's scary.
It is, yeah.
And how about when you look at your day to day, anything, you have any crazy morning routine? You have anything that you kind of do every day that helps you get ready or get through the day? Or
You mean like wake up and smack myself around?
Yeah,
you do 100 push-ups? No,
Yeah.
I don't do it. Lately it's been taking all my kids to school in the morning.
All right, that's fair.
So, and the reason for that is to motivate me to stay on task. Really, it's to help my wife out, right? My wife she works from home. She's been doing that for, I think 8 years now. So we're pretty fortunate and pretty lucky to be in the position that we are. Her working from home and we working so close. I mean, for 13 years, I worked 0.7 of a mile from my home. So as far as my daily routines, though. No, I mean, I'm at work every day, same time, and I don't have anything good for that.
That's fair.
Nothing crazy, right? I don't have any weird rituals.
That's what I was asking Derek. Like, drink any weird coffee?
Coffee is a must. I make the joke when I drop my kids off at the elementary school, although they're not in elementary school anymore, but I'd see my old colleagues and I was like, I'm going to go sit in my booth at Stewart's, drink my coffee.
Are you a Stewart's guy?
I've grown to be a Stewart's guy. Yeah, I don't know what it is. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't have my own booth, like my name engraved on it or anything like that. I don't sit down. But it was fun to let them know, because they're out. One of my friends is a crossing guard, my old colleagues, and so that was my joke. It's like, I'm gonna go sit at Stewart's and talk to Ralph for 4 hours before I gotta go to work. And she's like, must be nice, living the dream. So I bust on him a little bit. So you're living the dream too. You work 180 days a year.
That's it. That's not bad either.
Sorry for my educators. No, I know how hard they work.
They do work hard. They deserve every penny they get. Our teachers.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So in the conversation I have with my children all the time is we need to do a better job as society to see the value in what everyone does, right? We're so quick to critique people, or they don't do this or they don't do that. We don't know what people do every day, so take the time to appreciate what other people do, whether it's my client and they're having a tough day, or my former coworkers, which I still stay in contact with a few of them.
That's nice. Yeah, and I agree, man. Especially when we look at our teachers and all these people that are trying to educate our kids for us and or with us, the way it really works these days, and they just a lot of pressure. I was just having a conversation with someone, or maybe it was we were talking about earlier, that teachers, I feel like they're kind of on an island these days all by themselves, because they're getting pressure from the state and from administration coming down on them. You got to do these things, and then they get pressure coming at them from parents, and it's a lot of stuff. And these guys don't get paid, zillions of dollars a year to deal with all that and to help educate the youth of tomorrow.
And they're a certified professional.
Yeah.
So
they go to a good amount of school.
I chuckle when I say, parents are coming at them and stuff like that. Do you remember when COVID started, right? Everybody had the Facebook comments and posts, we appreciate teachers so much. We didn't realize how hard your work is. How fast has that changed, right? Everyone's back in school, and well, my child, they should have an exemption for this and blah, blah, blah. So it's just be mindful that they work hard. They're people too. They make mistakes.
I agree. We gotta take it easy on them. And thank them. Thank you. Educators, thank you. All right, last question. What if someone was thinking about either starting a side hustle in the blue collar industry, or leaving their full-time job to go on their own, or maybe they're just sitting around trying to figure out if they're going to go to college or go to trade school? What advice would you give someone that's considering a blue collar life, let's say?
Well, there's a couple things you need to consider. First and foremost, that you need to know that trade school is an option, and at this time that it's a great option. You know, it's very likely that if you were to go into a trade, and whether you acquire a skill or you become certified in something, that you know, you'll acquire a position and you could have a very comfortable and good life. If you're looking to start your own business, you need to be intelligent about how you're starting and with your finances, right? So a lot of people that I know have tried to start their business and they've ended up using it as like their own little personal piggy bank, and you need to treat it like a business. So, and I think one of the things that is easily overlooked is you need to be motivated every day, and you need to have that internal motivation, right? Because there's not always going to be somebody there telling you need to go to work today, or you need to you need to find your next job. You have to do that on your own. And when you're this is very important. If you're your own business or your own or you're self-employed, nobody's going to do it for you, and you're going to work harder than anybody else. In fact, the harder you work, the more successful you're going to be.
I keep hearing that.
Yeah, that's what they say. Yeah,
That's
easier said than done, right?
Work hard, you will be successful.
You're going to do a lot of things that that are going to be behind the scenes. People aren't going to see it. We talked earlier, right?
Mm-hmm.
The people, what they don't see that I do is I'm looking at jobs on Sunday. I'm writing this week. I've written an estimate every single night, right up till 10 o'clock. And that's after family time and sports and all that stuff. Those are things that you have to do.
Yeah, you don't ever go home. That's why I'm like, like when some people have jobs and they get to punch out and they get to go home. And when you own your own business, you don't really ever get to go home. Because when you go home, like you said, I'm waiting for my kids to go to bed at 8:30, and I'm either at the table or on my couch, and I got my laptop, and I'm doing proposals, and I'm catching up on emails, and it never really stops.
Yeah, so you can't be lacking mental toughness either. You know what I mean? Because it's going to be kind of a grind until you get into the groove of things of how do you create your estimates, and because I itemize everything. Mine's not even generic, so I list every product that I have to buy and then the cost of that product. So it can be a bit meticulous, but it's very time consuming. And I mean, unfortunately, I give free estimates too. So.
Listen, I'll tell you a quick story. A guy that I know, and I won't say the name of his company because I don't have permission to, but him and I went to this sales training thing together years and years ago, right? Probably 12 years ago. And when we got done, I asked him, I was like, what was the most impactful thing that you took away from this sales training? And he said, the most impactful thing is I'm now charging for my proposals, my estimates. He's like, none of my competitors do. He builds homes. Mm-hmm. He's like, not any of them charge for their proposals. He's like, and you know how much time I put into building a proposal? He goes, so now I charge $250.
Yeah.
It's not nearly enough money for the proposal for the amount of time that he puts into it. But he's like, but I charge $250. He's like, and if anything I apply that $250 towards the job if they say yes. Mm-hmm. If they say no, then I got paid to at least do the work, and I'm giving them basically a bunch of research that I did on their house and what needs to be done. He's like, and I feel good about it, and he's like, it really it's gotten rid of the tire kickers, and I thought, because back, again, this is 10, 12 years ago, back then there was a lot of tire kickers. Now people are lucky to find a contractor, right? But interesting he said that, it's a lot of work, and a meticulous proposal means a meticulous contractor, and I would imagine that's what I want in a contractor. It's attention to detail.
I think, again, you have to be, because it boils down to my reputation.
Yeah.
Right? So if I do a crappy job, not only... It only takes one bad job to wipe out 10 good ones.
Yeah.
So I don't have the luxury, nor would I want that. I wouldn't want anyone to say, I wouldn't hire Camenga Contracting. They did a horrible job. Mm-hmm. And that goes along that if you make a mistake, you got to fix it too and correct it. And I tell my wife every day I'm wrong, or I make a mistake.
Yeah.
So you have to, sometimes you got to own up to it and then just fix it. That's
it. Well, listen, I won't keep you any longer. You've been here long enough, but I really appreciate you taking the time to come and hang out with us and talk and tell our listeners about you and your business and your story and everything you got going on. And again, just really grateful to have you here.
Yeah, thanks a lot. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I wish anyone who's thinking or interested in starting their own business, now's the time. Be smart about it and make sure you can produce a product or you have a skill or a quality that people want.
Perfect. Thanks, man. And thank you for listening, and we will see you here. You'll hear from us next week.